What's up, everybody? Eric here, and I'm back once again to start trouble because that's what I do. I bring the truth to you, and I say the things a lot of people are thinking but unwilling to actually say, especially if you listen to my podcast, How, Why, What, which will be coming back soon, where I get really ugly. But on Biz Talk, I'm a little calmer because I bring in the professionals to talk about the real truths. I have some really awesome guests, and we actually this is the second part of our cybersecurity tech talk adventure here. And unlike last episode where I was just filling you with fear, right? Because that's the goal: fear mongering and marketing, make you scared so you press the button. This time, I'm looking to make you press the button about cybersecurity, AI, and Web 3.0 with really positive things. We're going to talk today again with Piere DePass, the he's going to be mad at me for saying this, the know-it-all, and not in a bad way, of CMMC. And then Martin Conroy, who couldn't be with us last week because he was doing some good work in the charity space with his veterans organization, Battlefield Commanders. So going to bring on my man Piere DePass from Cyberfixers. Piere, how you doing?
All right, Eric. Pleased to be here and looking forward to this next session.
Hopefully we won't fearmonger too much.
Exactly.
And Pierre is you had a correct title. You had corrected me. You're not the CEO. You're a
Founding member, and managing director.
Managing director of Cyberfixers.
Cyberfixers.
And you guys are doing a lot of NSA, CMMC stuff. And,
Right.
Okay, so you're a top secret guy. Are they watching me right now on this broadcast?
No, it's not. It's not top secret. It's not classified. It's controlled, unclassified information.
And you explained that last episode.
Right, CUI, correct.
And then Martin Conroy, the founder and CEO of Eligido. Did I get it?
Now you got it.
Now I got it. Eligido. And Eligido is a Web 3.0 company, blockchain, for those of you who are not sure what Web 3.0 is. That's a little bit more freedom than the controlled internet that we have today. But also, you are the founder of Battlefield Commanders, and you are a veterans-focused organization. I would love to talk to you about the Web 3.0 thing in a minute, Eligido. But you got to really, everybody knows I'm an advocate for veteran stuff. So talk to me for a minute about Battlefield Commanders.
Well, thank you. Praise God, and thank you for allowing me to speak about Battlefield Commander Foundation. The Battlefield Commander Foundation is a 501c3 that provides scholarships and mentorship to the children of fallen officers. Now, that's military, but also law enforcement, emergency responders as well.
So that's awesome. And here's a little known secret. If you don't know Martin, this man gets in a ring. This man gets in a cage and a ring to raise money for this cause. He goes in there and he beats a lot of people up.
No.
No, I know. But he wins a lot.
You did introduce yourself, saying that you like to stir up the pot. Where do you get your show kicked off stirring?
That's the goal. Nobody comes and listens. Nobody watches my show for, cupcakes and unicorns. They want to hear the real deal. But today, I'm not fear-mongering. Tell me about a little bit about Eligido.
Okay. To understand Eligido, you have to understand humans' evolution with the World Wide Web. Humans were achieved mass adoption with the World Wide Web in the mid-90s was when we started utilizing the World Wide Web on a daily basis. That was for email. We were utilizing it to do research, to fetch and retrieve information. So you were introduced to brands and you were introduced to websites so that you could conduct that type of research. In about 2004, humanity was mass adopted to what's known as Web 2.0. Web 2.0 is social media, likes, comments, sharing, online video. For the goal for brands, for Web 2.0 brand was user engagement, getting users engaged with their properties. Web 3.0, we entered mass adoption to Web 3.0 about 3 years ago. Now you're talking about decentralization, where you're taking the control of the data out of the centralized authorities. Now, hands, centralized authorities being Amazon's and Facebook's and Google, so on and so forth. And you're putting it more control for the user. Well, the goal for a Web 3.0 brand is immersion. getting a user immersed in their certain brand. So what Eligido does is it introduces users to transact directly with certain brands in a peer-to-peer fashion. Now, the system that Eligido has developed is that at time of customer acquisition, so in other words, the time that that user decides to actually do business with the brand, we collect significantly more data than a Web 2.0 intermediary, such as Amazon or Facebook Marketplace or eBay.
So you collect more data points to create a more immersive experience for brands and businesses. Um, and that is where we're going. I mean, I think even with Web 2.0, we see a lot of companies adopting AR and VR and things like that to try to get more engagement and get their customers more immersed. But today, we're not really talking about that immersion, and we're not talking about marketing. We're talking starting off, and again, if we have time, we'll be talking about business application for all of this cybersecurity, AI tech, Web 3.0, blockchain. But I want to really hit today a little bit on have some deep dive and honest conversations about the careers in this industry. And off camera, you had said to me, Pierre, when I had mentioned the statistics that what was it? ICS squared, International Information System Security
I,
Certification.
ISC squared.
It's ridiculous.
Yes,
It's a long
ISC.
name.
Yes.
And I thought I picked long names. Their numbers are kind of skewed a little bit, but there is a workforce demand in some capacity for cybersecurity.
Right.
And we know as Web 3.0 grows, there's that demand too, right? Because again, new technologies. I think I was on a call with the Camera Operators Mechanics Union a few months ago, and they were talking about there's going to be a drop off. They're predicting a drop off in work for the camera operators union. That's everything stage related, film related, television related. So from the behind the scenes up front, because of AI, and it's not because AI is taking jobs. It's because there's not enough people trained in how to do the job yet.
Right.
Right. So I think as Web 3.0 kicks in, we're going to see that too. I think, cybersecurity's kind of bridged that gap. I just believe people aren't aware and people are immediately tuned into, I don't have a college degree, so I can't work in cybersecurity. And I know through workforce development, there's certification programs that can help people get jobs in the cybersecurity sector. Now,
Right.
you probably know more than me about that. What do you give us a little idea what that's all about? And, is there these spaces for people who maybe this is a second life for them? They're 57 years old and they get certified. Can they work in there?
Well, it's funny you said that because over the last, I'd say, 6 months, I've had quite a few people come to me over the age of 50 that's concerned about, they're peaking out where they are in terms of raises and salary caps and so on. And they're looking for that second life. And everyone's trying to turn to technology, right? Cybersecurity, because there's supposedly so many jobs. Unfortunately, with cybersecurity, a lot of the jobs where you see advertised, right? And don't quote me on this because I don't have the hard, fast data. It's just an opinion from having been in this industry for as long as I have and seen all the things I've seen, is that there are jobs, but there are certain requirements that goes along with that, like programming, right? If you are going to try to do something in technology where you're working in what you would call an engineering role, first of all, you want to make sure that you're at least comfortable with Python, okay? Because you have to run certain code, and you don't have to really write the code from scratch, but you have to be able to read it and understand what it says and do modifications to that code. And many people at the age of 50, if they have not spent time in that space, they're going to find it challenging because they're not basically they're not trained or experienced to think that way. Am I making sense to you, right? So the jobs are there. And a lot of the Meta, the Google, the Microsoft, the Facebook, I've seen online where they're telling folks, you don't need a college degree. We will train you. If we agree to hire you, we will train you. So a lot of the younger generation that's coming out of school right now, not necessarily with a 4-year degree, maybe a 2-year, because you do, when they say you don't need a college degree, you need something. If it's even just the raw desire to succeed or to learn, right? Not just to say you're going to walk in and say, okay, I'm here, show me what to do so I can collect a big paycheck. It just doesn't work. You know, I've always told, you know, my nieces and nephews and my children that, look, if you want to make $100,000, you cannot show up with $10,000 worth of knowledge or desire. It doesn't work. Okay. And if you're not building your dreams, meaning your desires, or driving you to build something, you're helping someone else build their dream. Okay. So I think at the age of 50, a lot of folks have gotten past that point where they don't really care.
They're
building their own dreams or helping someone to build theirs.
If you don't mind listening,
Yeah, she bring stuff up.
yeah, sure.
They're more concerned with just having something to do after that point in their life, in their career.
Right. So, you know, I think too, because I see some things here, and I know this kind of will cross over with Martin and Web 3.0, like things like security analysts, technicians, non-technical roles. You know, basically my understanding is that we still need, for a security analyst, you still need some kind of college, right?
Yes. Well, go ahead.
But there are certification programs you would have to go through, and you'd have to get a certification, right, to become a security analyst. And I imagine, you know, there's definitely, again, Martin, you know, being in the Web 3.0 space, getting into blockchain and stuff, you know, there are security things that we need, right?
Correct.
There's
what we're going to see, and Mr. DePass could, I'm sure, would agree with this, is that the cybersecurity field is going to change significantly because of the technology that's going to be utilized to verify who you are. We are going to see much more fingerprint scanning, more retinal scanning. That's going to be becoming more commonplace. We're going to also learn that all of our data has already been hacked. Every piece of valuable piece of data about us that's in writing that has gone through a centralized server is already in the hacker's hands. Most people do not realize that the majority of insurance carriers in this country over the summer were hacked in a malicious group hacking that occurred at the same time. So think about all the type of PII information, private information that you provide to an insurance carrier on an insurance application. Everything that somebody would need to know about you, from your address to the type of medication that you're on, to what, you know, your bank statements, to do auto drafts, everything is already there. It's already out. So what's going to be our most valuable data? Our health data, or retinal scans, or dental scans, or fingerprints. That's the way that we're going to be utilizing identification in the future. So as the crooks try to figure out ways to beat the systems, the cybersecurity specialist positions are going to change to much more than just hacking at a computer screen. You know, we're going to see much more advanced ways to steal people's identities. It's going to basically become one of those movies that we grew up with when we were younger. Minority Report, any one of them. Choose any one of them.
Here we go. I'm pretty sure the NSA is always checking in on me because I'm always saying dumb shit. So, but, you know, that brings me to that point of there's definitely cybersecurity is in constant flux because there's always the constant enemy. And again, I don't want to go down the spooky pipeline on this. I want to keep it positive. But because of them, that's why we need more people, and that's why there's more opportunities in that cybersecurity space. And this goes along with AI. Now, I'm not going to say you need a lot of training and a lot of education to be developing AI, or maybe you just got to be a genius, you know, out of the box. But and we might bring Sage Del Val in part 3 of this if we have it, and because he's in the AI space, he's with different systems. But again, we're talking about as all these threats emerge, as more businesses evolve, right? Especially because I foresee there's definitely a business application that is probably going to in blockchain that's going to help businesses evolve from even from a mom and pop shop standpoint um, to higher success rates. I could foresee that really happening, which means that's more jobs again, right? So everything here, whether it's threat or it's adaptive use, is consistently going to create the demand for more jobs. So when people are out there going, I can't find a job, get off your ass, go get a certification through a workforce development program. Get it. Listen, who was RX5 down in Atlantic City? James Whitehead and Horace Jones, I believe his last name is. And you know Horace,
Yes.
Pierre. They just put line people up, cybersecurity installers to install hard lines to install tech systems for the security in the city. And this was through a cybersecurity workforce development program. This was the hard assets, right? So this was the hard technology. Um, and none, I don't think one of these people, and I can't say for sure, but I don't think one of these people came out of a college to do this because they were so young. It looked more like they were looking for opportunity, you know. And so talk to me a minute, Martin, about where you see that job space in blockchain 3.0, cybersecurity, AI, from where you're sitting.
Well, you know, 2 years ago, we were in a significantly different political environment than we are today in this country. Other countries saw the value of decentralization and blockchain projects, and all the money that was forced offshore in the United States went to make some people in other countries very wealthy. So by the time this administration took over, they wanted to significantly relax those regulations through an act that went into effect last month called the Genius Act. Now, there were other regulatory restrictions that were also eased back regarding the blockchain over the summer. So now we're going to see significant innovation that over the course of the last couple of years has gone offshore. It's now going to come into the country. Now, you're seeing this with the type of investments that are coming from government programs like the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, where they're now finally interested in funding additional blockchain and decentralized programs. But you're going to see significant money coming into the blockchain. So now, understanding blockchain, and to Mr. DePass's point, you have to be able to program in Python or JavaScript. But besides that, the programming is very, very similar. So people who have their standard CS degrees will have the ability to transition from an HTTPS environment over to a blockchain environment, over to programming in the blockchain. But here's what's more important. And I speak from someone who does volunteer work at my college, New Jersey Institute of Technology. I do resume days with the soon-to-be graduates, interview days, and I also judge their capstone project. The younger generation has to get out and start talking to people. The issue is that they could answer the first question, but when you get that follow-up question, that why or how question, that's where they're freezing up. And to be able to stay ahead of what's transpiring with technology, to have the vision to see what type of technology we're going to need to deal with artificial intelligence being mass adopted in less than 5 years. What technologies are going to become available? How do you have the vision to create something like that? And until the AI actually starts doing all the creating, we're the ones who have to continue doing the creating. So people need to be able to talk to each other, and the younger generation is missing that.
Right. And, just to your comment about AI doing all the creating, it's funny. I had a conversation with Sage Delval, CEO and co-founder of Different Systems. And he's like, look, let me tell you a secret, Eric. No matter what AI is, there's always going to be a need for a human, even behind AI, because somebody has to control AI, make sure AI is secure, write code for AI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's always going to be, at least from my perspective, there's always going to be work in the tech space. But Pierre, I see there are obviously, again, let's go back, and I don't want to really talk dark here about stuff. But look, there's risks when everything new comes on. There's always going to be somebody. There's already somebody out there who's trying to figure out how to break this system. Probably far ahead of the people who are getting trained to build the systems. So talk to us, Pierre. Like, what's the counterintelligence? What are the countermeasures now as we go into this Web 3.0? And let's face it, it also affects our current state. What are we doing, and where can people really start to dig in, to learn about this? Again, we talked about Second Life, but you spoke about the young audience who's looking for jobs. Some people aren't going to college; they just don't want to. They just can't. They can't function in that space.
Right.
So what do we do?
Well, let me take a quick step back. I mean, I know you mentioned starting out that you're in the fear-mongering space this week.
I'm trying not to be.
But you can't get away from it, unfortunately, because, look, last week I think we spoke about, Martin, I believe you missed this, when I explained to Eric that, look, the difference between, they have these two groups of folks, the bad guys and the good guys, right? I mean, you ever seen the bad, the good, and the ugly, right? It's a classic film, right? Okay, one of my favorite, by the way, okay? And you have folks who are paid to protect these networks, these technology, if you will. Last week, I think I mentioned to you the main difference between these two groups. You have black hats that are the bad guys that are basically given all the names for folks who break into and hack the network. And then you have the white hats, okay, who are supposed to be the good guys, supposed to protect that network. Well, in the technology space, in the hackers world, it is said the only difference between those two groups, who's signing the checks for the work needs to be done. Okay, so if you're being paid as a white hat, that's the work you do. If you're being paid as a black hat, that's the work you do. You have some folks, and again, strictly an opinion here, okay? Daytime or nighttime, whenever you're on the clock doing the good work, you are a white hat. Off the clock, you are the black hat. So how do you fix the system?
Everybody got to have a side hustle.
when it's inherent, okay? The actual failure is built into the system because the same folks you're looking to protect it are sometimes the very ones who are building, because developers, when they build software, tend to leave what they call maintenance hooks. But a lot of times people refer to them as backdoors, because you'll fire a developer, but you had no idea that individual left a hole, a backdoor in your environment in the form of the software they developed. Okay. And many times employees leave these very large and mid-sized companies, and for months, sometimes years, their access was not disabled because the folks generally, a lot of them, they don't know how to do that because of turnover. So these guys, you fire them and they come right back in, and they're probably using your network, that company's network, to perform these acts. And then they find out only because their carrier, like the Verizons or the AT&T, says, hey, we see a lot of malicious activities coming off of your network. We just black holed your IP address. All of a sudden now they got to go find out why. And that's usually when they find out. So, I mean, you're asking, well, what kind of a safeguards can you put in? It's going to be difficult because it's technology. And sure, with the human element, and then AI in the mix, and what I just said about the development of the software, you're going to need folks at the very top to like a checks and balances, like how we have the Congress, you have the White House, and you have the justice system, right? The courts. You're going to have to put some kind of checks and balances in place. And to me, right now, doesn't really exist. And that, to me, I think is where the real issue is.
So, again, trying to get out of the scary space.
Right.
Thanks, Pierre.
You're welcome.
made me a liar.
Let's just say there's going to be a bunch of new jobs coming out.
Yeah, there's going to be a bunch of new jobs, because I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, let's be real here. The private sector leads. I mean, I get it. We have DARPA and we have all the spooky lasers that nobody knows about, and eventually it comes to us, blah, blah, blah. And the government uses a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, we lead the change. Private sector leads the change. Blockchain, it's going to be private sector has been leading that change. Um, Cybersecurity, the government hires third parties to handle all the cybersecurity, right? So it's a matter of us saying filling these gaps, like you said, this creating these tiers and saying to corporations XYZ, you have to do ABC, and this is what your structure should look like. These people need college degrees. These people need certifications. This guy right here, he just needs to watch everybody. You know what I mean? And it goes the same in the blockchain space and in the AI space. So again, we go back to how do we get, and to you saying NJEDA has all these innovation grants, and I mean, we're tapping into the workforce development grant in another space, and with our not-for-profit, but every state in the country has something. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be New Jersey. It's New York. It could be, South Dakota. It could be anywhere. Economic development programs exist, and a lot of these programs are actually built on what the private sector told them they needed, right? So we got to get these folks to start asking these questions. How do I get this job? Where is this job? Um, and I want to jump on that for, segue into here, because I do have a bit of a gripe when it comes to technology. Technology has made job finding excruciatingly a pain in the ass. It hasn't made it easier. It's made it maybe easier for the person who has to weed through 500 applications, but it hasn't made it easier for the job seeker.
Right.
And we see that. Um, how do we tell somebody who wants to be in cybersecurity, who wants to be in AI, who wants to be in blockchain? How do we encourage them to either get the workforce development training, or, a lot of them are never going to get around the AI scanning their resume for keywords. They're just not. So what do we do for that? What do we do for these people?
Well, okay. No, Martin, you go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, please go ahead, Martin.
Education. We have to provide them with sourced, reputable education, updates. In a Web 2.0 world, got to remember, user engagement is the goal. Well, the brands that mastered Web 2.0, they have been working on their Web 3.0 plans for years and years and years. They understand how important immersion is. That's why Apple devices tell you every single week how long you were on each one of the apps is on your phone. All that data is extremely important. And to Pierre's point, the government has some safeguards in place that those technology brands are required to do that. They're required to tell us how much we're actually on those brands. Once these regulations are completely lifted, and the civilians, the normal person, sees the type of liquidity that's going to be created by these digital assets for these large brands, it's going to open up an entire new world, because that liquidity is going to be focused on projects that achieve user immersion, get people to have more time in system. How can you get, think about Meta's plans with the goggles. That's one of their biggest plays, that they're assuming that people are going to be hooked up to video games. That's going to all open up over the course of the next couple of years. We're going to see innovation in ways that we've never imagined it. And then we're going to be racing towards artificial intelligence mass adoption. That's when we're talking to an AI like we're talking to one of our best friends, because that AI knows everything that it can about you from everything that's made available in the public. So again, we're going to see significant innovation. And in order to stay ahead on the job market, you have to understand how humans are handling that interaction. You have to understand what's important. Okay, so if you know that care data is a play, what companies are securing their healthcare data? You see big projections coming with retinal eye scans. Well, what companies are creating that type of technology, what companies are creating the software with that type of technology, how are we safeguarding that type of data once it's actually received, because that's the way that access is going to come. Look at an airport right now. They're filming you without your permission in an airport. And I'm not talking from 50 feet away. I'm talking up front when you're checking in. What are they doing with that data?
Hmm.
So that's people have to be educated in terms of what's happening. This way they can be employable over the course of the next couple of years.
Yeah. Go ahead, Pierre.
And I totally agree. I mean, I think as Martin, rightly mentioned, that I think one of the solution here is education, right? And I think the earlier that they get started, it's going to be the better. You may want to have to start that stuff in high school, right? So when folks when you have the next generation coming out of high school, they have some idea of where to go. In many countries, the schooling system is designed a bit different than we have it here, where they have what they call primary school and secondary school. Okay. And then to go to high school, you have to pass like a test to show that you have what it takes to make it to high school. Okay. That the primary would be grammar school, let's say. And then secondary, if you haven't successfully completed primary school, then you go learn a trade, right? And I believe at some point in this country, it used to be the same way.
Yeah.
And this is exactly the type of thing, as Martin just mentioned, education. You have to provide more options than say, listen, if you choose not to go to college, or if you can't afford to go to college, that there are other options where you can achieve something similar to someone who's gone through a college environment without having to go through that environment. And I think that's where I mentioned earlier that Microsoft, Google, they have mentioned that they're willing to train the right individuals without them needing a college degree. And I think that's going to go a long way, but there needs to be more of it. It needs to be more standardized and make it more of an offering, like you would to say someone going to college, right? Make it an option.
Yeah, and I think we can see that hopefully evolve in the workforce development programming spaces, as that seems to, I've noticed, it's always been there, by the way. Workforce development's always been there, right? The Department of Labor has always been involved in some capacity in every state in developing, having some kind of training programs. But I feel like, from my perspective, being around it now the last, decade of those agencies, working with those agencies, it almost seems like it's really evolving. Like, there's a lot more funding. Like, somebody realized that, the university of whatever isn't going to offer this training. And there's no budget in the high school to offer this training. So we have to offer this training. So I think we'll see that evolve as we see technology speed past the education. It's already speeding past the education, as again, like I said, in the film industry, there's a lack of people who understand how to program AI for the film industry, right? So we have a gap in job potential or jobs for a period of time till that catches up. There's some other things too. We're sitting here and we're talking a lot about, cybersecurity, AI, Web 3.0, and all of this stuff being, programming, JavaScript and Python. But there's a whole nother segment in all this stuff, right? There's compliance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Compliance, especially for government contractors, compliance officers, compliance reviewers. There's, grant writing, RFP writing. These are whole teams that are going to need to respond, because I would argue and imagine that there's some adoption that hasn't gone public yet at the federal side, at the government side, at least at the DoD side, that will eventually, needs to be addressed today. But then there's things like UX, UI, right? Because you still need that interface for somebody to be able to go. And for anybody who's not sure what that interface is, if your computer ever crashed or a program ever crashed, and you get a little pop-up that says, should we report this to Apple? You know what I mean? That's your UX UI. That's a little screen that pops up so that you don't have to figure out all that code to write all the code and search it all out. It does it for you. So there's people who need to do that job. So I think there's a lot of potential in this space. And again, I go back to, you mentioned education is a way to communicate to people. it's hard to get the word out, right? Like, I don't think the internet has given. I think the internet has created more why me's and victim mentality than we want to admit. Um, I'm just calling it like I see it. So how do we break through this noise, gentlemen? Like, how do we break through the noise of the bullshit when we're using the internet? How do we deliver? Again, I still have a problem with these Indeeds and glass doors and all this stuff using technology. It makes jobs. I knew a guy who spent a year and a half looking for this. Was a man with a PhD. A year and a half
Hmm.
on the internet. He had to tailor every resume. He had to tailor every cover letter just to get through the AI. That's harsh. So how do we talk to people? How do we get them looking for the jobs and asking about it, or asking for the workforce? Any ideas and thoughts? Let's get people up off their ass doing something.
Do you want to take that one, or do you want me to jump on it?
Well, let me just add one quick piece. I think because it's been circulating in my head since Eric started talking, is that I remember from listening to my grandparents and my parents, a lot of what they talked about was the fact that here in this country, and I think this administration talked a lot about bringing production, right, factories back to this country. And I think when the factories left, there was a quick change in that if you did not have a degree, you weren't going to make any money.
Yeah.
Okay. That I think is the mentality where if they start doing rebuilding, true manufacturing again in this country, it'll bring back more of the on-the-job training, right? If someone shows a desire or a capacity for a certain type of trade or thing, and it's an option to make a living, that they can actually get trained in it and become very, very, very well, probably better than someone who's had the discipline just to go to school or go to college and learn it. So that I think is going to go a long way as one of the pillars of having other options that we're talking about here. Martin.
So again, I'm going to give you a Web 3.0 answer.
Mhm.
Pay to play. So people are going to be, their education is going to be dictated by the larger centralized authorities that they're still tapped into. So, and the way that those centralized authorities are going to be able to control the data that the user is receiving is by paying them to absorb that data. So there's going to be, more interactive absorption of that data where you're going to be providing answers to surveys, so on and so forth. Secondly is live events. Think about what a live event is now compared to what it was 40 years ago. If you were at a live event 40 years ago, and for, let's just say, example's sake, say a concert, you were looking at the stage, you were looking at the people that you were with, you were singing, you were having a good time. If you're at a concert now, what does it look like? Looks like a bunch of people holding up their phones, taking videos of them at the concert, or taking videos of the concert themselves. So the brands that are going to deal with the separation of society most effectively due to Web 4.0 are the brands that are going to be able to focus on putting the best experiences on at live events, so that people are not obsessed with having their phones out recording everything, and they're more focused on the content that's being delivered, because live is still going to be, if taught effectively, if presented effectively, is still going to be the best education source for humans. Still going to outpace reading it, hearing it audibly. Live instruction is still going to be the best for the time being. But to reiterate, pay to play. That's where your people who can't afford it are going to receive education and live events.
Yeah, I like what you said about the live, effective live education, live events. It's interesting because I don't remember, and it's been a minute since I read the statistics, but statistically, Gen Alpha, like a massive, I think it was like 50 something percent or 50 some, close to 60%, were echoing Gen X behaviors in the want to taste it, touch it, feel it, smell it versus the virtual world. So we saw a shift in a generation because the millennials were massive adopters of technology, massive trusters, right? They trusted implicitly, went through that whole thing. Maybe not the Zennials so much, but that second wave millennial, they definitely adopted it. Um, but that Gen Alpha, our current new workforce, is really about, I want to be in the environment. A good percentage of them, I want to be in the environment. I want a hands-on education. I want to be taught. I don't want to. I mean, we saw it. We saw it with juniors and seniors and college students during the pandemic. Grades plummeted. Attendance plummeted. They didn't want to be on a camera. Getting an education. So I think, I think live, effective education is going to be important. Workforce development and training. I mean, Amazon's already doing what you're saying. I mean, Amazon is sending their people to school for programs, right? For different types of training. And again, a percentage of that is the hope that you'll stay with Amazon and grow. But they're not holding everybody's feet to the fire to stay married to Amazon after they graduate. So that's a good opportunity. And for those, the people who are listening to this, it really doesn't matter your age. It does not matter your age. If there is something out there for you, there's a certificate program. There's you can audit classes at a college. You can, you might not walk away with a certificate, but at least you get the knowledge. There's a lot of opportunities. So what do we do as a small business? What do we do as businesses to provide that? Do we take the Amazon model on? And do we start offering training to these students, these second lifers? Should we be taking this responsibility on? Either one of you want to grab that?
Well, I think that in the educational space, right? I think that, as you mentioned, you keep mentioning workforce development. As I mentioned previously, I think the options that we're going to provide for the next generations, it's going to have to become more standardized, because a lot of times they have the desire, but they don't have the information where to go to get the training, right? And so it becomes a barrier trying to figure out, and because of cybersecurity being such a wide field, and as Martin mentioned earlier, that technology changes and grows in leaps and bounds, right? Give it 5 years, all of what we are concerned about today as a threat and what we consider potentials will have become reality and will be something distant in the past. Okay, so we have to find a way to try to formalize the different options and standardize it, so that when someone is in high school, they start looking from like their sophomore year to say, hey, I know what this particular field entails, and their guidance counselors, right, their teachers can say, hey, you have this ability, you should consider this. If it's more standardized, formalized, I believe that can happen. But without that, I think it's going to continue to be a challenge to kind of get folks to focus on what really matters for the future.
Martin, you want to tackle that one? I think that Pierre nailed it. Could really hit it much better. Who controls the education is going to be able to dictate the direction of certain communities and how that education is delivered, because as we race towards integration, as humanity races towards integration, we're doing it blindly, deafly, dumbly, and but there is a large portion of the population that's not going to want to be hooked up, and the education and how to deal with that type of intrusive environment, that type of intrusive being, has to start now. It's going to be Web 5.0 mass adoption. The experts are saying 2035 to 2040, you will be walking around with superhumans on the streets. And when I say superhumans, people that have chips implanted in their head, that have all different types of implants that could perform bionic movements. That's 15 years, gentlemen. How are we going to deal with those types of people when we actually are around them? Are you going to be?
I'm gonna have to put chips in my brain, because there's no way I'm gonna.
You talk about that. I look at it this way. In the 60s and 70s, when we had the Soviet Union, the Cold War going on, right? the West versus that, the East, if you want to call it that, they were more concerned with these superhumans. They wanted to make sure their athletes outperformed everyone else, right? The design of steroids and all the other stuff that went along with it, right? So I think it's just natural, as Martin has mentioned, that you're going to see. So if you increase your capabilities, I'm going to have to come one up on you to make sure I can compete and best you. So that's going to drive a whole new generation of what? That's the question mark.
Well, it's going to be
What
hardware.
exactly? Of what? Of what?
But I mean, again, it's a matter of hardware, software, security, everything else. Because the last thing you want to have is technology implanted into your body to make you superhuman that somebody can hack and make you do something you don't want to do.
What exactly?
Who's controlling the education and how?
Well, yeah. I mean, let's
Is
go
it a
back to that.
wearable or is it an implant?
Yeah. Let's go back to that for a minute in education, because getting away from the future and getting into this dark space again. I'm trying really hard here to keep it positive. But now I'm about to get dark. There's a disparaging divide between who is currently, well, first of all, the programming in our high schools and society. I mean, we have students going in, and remember, we went through this cyclically, right? We know that at some point, eighth grade, that was it. And then the industry broke. We had an early industry was driving what the education should be so it could make local community laborers. So now we had 12th grade. And then when the industry sort of began to collapse, we saw the colleges come in and dictate that you needed a college education. So the curriculum changed. And again, it's private sector controlling the education system right now. Always has been, always will be. But even there, all that is still far beyond, is because we're racing so fast with technology. It's ahead of everybody. We're not even getting those dictators, those educational consultants, giving our current students or even our future students the advantage in the schools, because by the time you get through the bureaucracy to get programming in place, something new's there. So, and then you have teachers, counselors, they're behind the eight ball. You know what I mean?
Amazing observation. If I could share a story, as I mentioned, I do a lot of work with my alma mater, New Jersey Institute of Technology, and I met with one of their executives over the winter, and I won't name him because of what I'm about to tell you, but he asked me whether or not I looked at the new president's 2035 plan. And he said, "What do you think about it?" And I said, "Yeah, I read the entire thing." And he said, "Well, what do you think about it?" I said, "I think that he should throw it in the garbage." And we got into a very detailed dialogue about that. And I explained to him a story that I heard from a consultant who was doing work with their Innovation Institute. And their New Jersey Innovation Institute is NJIT's technology incubator. And this consultant was with several of the executives there, and she took a look at the entire NJIT curriculum, and they said, "Well, you're making some pretty strong suggestions on changes here. Why do you feel so strongly about this?" She said, "Well, all those CS students, computer science students that just registered for, this past fall semester that just started, if you follow the curriculum that you have right now, by the time that they graduate, their degrees will be useless, worthless." Now, this is a $150,000 education. And I explained that to this gentleman that I was meeting with. And I said, "You need to have fluidity in this plan. Anything that you plan right now that takes 24 months to put together for a university, it's already outdated if you're talking about technology.
Yep.
You could do that for English. You could do that for history. You cannot do that for technology right now. You need to be changing this thing every single semester."
Yep.
Yeah.
And no, but it's true. I mean, I have heard that same argument so often. I mean, I saw it just recently in the spring, where I know a few next generation who graduated finance, okay, technology, engineering degrees, and they're having issues finding jobs. Okay. So I mean, you learn the theory, but how applicable is that theory once you come out of the academia environment, right? What can you really do with it? And when I put this to a few folks that are actually in manufacturing, they're like, well, they have to get internships, but that requires you to keep a certain GPA, a certain this, a certain that, okay, before you can qualify and hopefully get an internship, so that when you're leaving, when you're graduating, you have something to put on the resume, and hopefully maybe even that same company can retain you because you have shown your worth, right? You have demonstrated your capabilities. So in that respect, yeah, I mean, if they don't adapt and change and try to keep up with what's relevant out there, when the student leave, they're behind the eighth ball. They have to go through a training and a learning. And as Martin just said, you're coming out of an era where you just spent $150,000, and yet you got nothing to show for it. How is that?
Yeah. So listen, let me ask a question, because I want to leave this on a positive note.
Right.
Right.
Here you go again.
So,
I think this was positive. I think it's a pretty clear message. You got to get out there and you got to get educated on what's happening fast.
okay. So you just answered my question. Was what's a piece of advice we could give a career seeker, regardless of their age? And you just said that you got to be in touch. You got to get, understand what's available, and you got to jump on it. And that's from you, Martin. What do you think, Pierre? What's a good piece of advice for job seekers today? What should they be doing to be on top of it?
Oh, I echo the same thing. I echo the same sentiments. I mean, but the thing is that it goes back to what I said prior, is that where do they go to get that information? They should have a kind of a liaison at their school. Matter of fact, Martin, NGIT is also my alma mater, right? Oh, yes. So, I mean, I could totally relate to what you've just said. But the thing is, they're going to have to provide standardized options, so that when these next generation are graduating, young men, young women coming out of college, that they're not trying to go reinvent the wheel, so to speak, to try to go to the Indeeds and the Monsters and the Zip recruiters. They already know what direction they want to go, and they have some means of getting there, right? It's not that they're going to have to go out here and say, okay, well, where do I go? What do I do?
Well, here's what I could tell you as somebody who has sought to be involved with not only our alma mater, but other local colleges. And Eric and I had this conversation the first day that we met, that this is not just an NGIT issue here, that the universities are struggling right now to work together as teams. And the reason, in my humble perspective, why NJT is struggling, I had interactions with Montclair State and I had interactions with Princeton, that they did not work together as teams, is that over the course of the last couple of decades, a lot of universities have changed a lot of different positions to performance-driven contracts. Now, when you give somebody who has no sales experience, no sales leadership, no sales training, a performance-driven contract, they think very tactically. They think only about making their next quarter. They only think about making their next year. Otherwise, they could be there all day. Well, that's an error when you're coming into a space of education. To put out the best educated student, give them the best chance. You have to work together as a team, and you have to make it, secondly, you have to make it more welcome to employers who want to hire your students.
For sure.
It's not for this, to do this properly, because if we're looking for solutions at the university level, we have to get away from employers have to go to the internal university indeed. Because all universities have it, and they expect all employers, all of us, to go in there and set up our, all job postings and put it in there. But they're not promoting it effectively, and the students aren't even looking in there. That's where they expect us to get the students for jobs. Well, guess what? That's not the way that it was 30 years ago. When you would contact a career services department, you would actually speak to a human about somebody who has a fit for that specific occupation that you're looking for. And they would give you hand you over to the right type of student
Yeah.
fit. Universities are not doing that anymore.
No, they're not, and we're not. I'm not. I agree with you, and I have a whole thing. And we'll save it for my podcast, where every other word out of my mouth is a cuss. Um, we should have that conversation on the podcast. It's an ugly show, but we're honest, where we get to talk about things that people really need to friggin' do. But where I want to leave this off is because I did want to talk about applications of everything we discussed today for the small business community. But it was important for me to hit the workforce stuff because people are questioning jobs. Like, what do I do? So real quick, Pierre, where can they find you? People find you on the web.
You can go to Piere@cyberfixers.net.
So they can email you directly.
Correct. And my website is going to be cyberfixers.net on the World Wide Web.
Okay. And Martin, where can we find you?
My coaching website is www.battlefieldcommanders.com. That ties directly into the charity's website, and also you can get information about Eligido there. Eligido.
I'll get it right one day.
Eligido.
I'll get it right one day. Gentlemen, we are definitely going to be planning a part 3 to this conversation because I want to deep dive into with you guys applications. We talked about the horrors of cybersecurity and why small businesses should have cybersecurity, some kind of more than Norton one layer or whatever. But I want to talk to the applications of Web 3.0, blockchain, cybersecurity, how businesses benefit from all of this stuff and how they find it. So we're going to reschedule probably in October, folks. You guys come back for part 3, which hopefully maybe that'll be the final chapter. Who knows? We might have a part 4 depending on how
positive space, right?
Right, positive space. We'll keep it positive. Try to keep it positive. And then on another note, we have our cybersecurity event happening November 12th in Atlantic City. Our partner is Cyberfixers in this. It will be a small business track. It will be a government contracting track. So we'll be accommodating everybody, people who are already doing business with the government, telling them why their asses are cooked if they're not secure and up to compliance, and small businesses. And then Martin, you and I and local content, Athletes Make the Best, we have on October 25th in Atlantic City at the most amazing arena in Atlantic City. Literally, like you people said, it's the Coliseum. We have a VIP exclusive for Fight Night where we have the 3rd floor. I'm calling it the Emperor's View, to look down over the fight, where hopefully you'll be fighting that night in an exhibition bout for your charity. So that's October 25th. You can check out both of those events at procurementcon with an N.com with an M. And check those events out. They are there. Folks, thank you. I will definitely be scheduling you guys for part 3 shortly. We'll probably kick that off in October. And once again, thank you so much for your support and bringing this information out. I know all 2 of my fans love the show. And we will definitely get back together very soon. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate you. And go out